making a creamy chicken and wild rice soup in the Instant Pot. We've been having some really cold weather here in Southern California. I know you're gonna say Southern California, cold weather, but it has been. So we're making a nice, rich, creamy, hearty soup for the family. I'm actually gonna share some with my relatives that live within the area too. So we're gonna be making a creamy chicken and wild rice soup in the Instant Pot. So let me show you what it looks like. It has big chunks of chicken, it's creamy, lots of wild rice in there, and it's hearty and it's a meal in itself. So come along with me and let's make some creamy chicken and wild rice soup in the Instant Pot together.
Let's take a look at the ingredients needed to make this recipe. 5 stalks of celery, 4 small carrots, 1 medium yellow onion, about 1 pound to 1.25 pounds of chicken thighs, these are bone-in, 1 cup of wild rice rinsed, a 16-ounce pack of mushrooms, a teaspoon of kosher salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of ground black pepper, a teaspoon of poultry seasoning, 1/2 teaspoon of ground thyme, 6 tablespoons of butter, 1.5 cups of heavy cream, 2 tablespoons of garlic. So if you're doing keto, you could do 1/3 cup of almond flour. If you're doing just gluten-friendly or gluten-free, you can use gluten-free all-purpose flour. And if you're just following a standard diet, you can use 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. This is for the roux. 2 cans of low-sodium chicken broth, 2 whole bay leaves, a tablespoon of dried parsley flakes, and 2 cups of water. We're going to begin by preparing our vegetables. First, we're going to peel and dice our onion. Then we're going to move on to our celery and slice it down into thin slices, then dice it up. We can put all of this into the same bowl. Our carrots, we're going to peel them. Then we're going to slice them into small slices. I like to cut the carrot in half if it's a little bit thick, otherwise they're just going to be small circle slices. Move on to cleaning the mushrooms. The first thing I like to do is rub the outside of the mushrooms with my hands in running water just to get off the extra pieces of dirt. Then I sprinkle on some table salt. I use this as an abrasive to clean the outside even better. It helps scrub off all the dirt on the outside of the mushrooms. Then when I'm all done, I give them a good rinse and put them on a paper towel to dry off. While we're letting the mushrooms dry, I'm going to go ahead and rinse my wild rice, and make sure you got the wild rice, which is all black grains of rice. If you have a wild rice mix, it's going to have different colors, white, dark, reddish. So make sure you have pure wild rice for this recipe. So I'm just rinsing it, straining it out, and that's all it is to it. Now that the mushrooms are dry, it's time to start cutting them up. I go ahead and go through each one, cutting off the bottom of the stems. I do that first, then I'm going to go through and slice them up. I want this to be quite a hearty soup. I'm going to be cutting quite thick chunks of the mushrooms. They're thick slices. If I cut them really thin, they're just going to be something which is better in just a sauce, but because this is going to be a hearty soup, I'm making thicker slices, and these are medium-sized button mushrooms. Now I'm going to plug in my Instant Pot and start adding in all the ingredients. I'm adding in all my vegetables, the carrots, onions, and celery. Then I'm going to add in my chicken pieces on top of the vegetables. On top of that, I'm going to add in my 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. Dump in my sliced mushrooms. Pour in my 2 cans of low-sodium chicken broth. Put in my 2 cups of water. Add in my 1 cup of rinsed, uncooked wild rice. At this point, I'm just going to give it a gentle stir just to incorporate the rice with the vegetables and all the mushrooms too. Now we're going to start adding in the spices, starting with 1 teaspoon of poultry seasoning, a 1/2 teaspoon of ground thyme, 1 tablespoon of dried parsley flakes, and 2 bay leaves, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, and about a half teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. Now that all the soup ingredients are in the pot, I'm going to go ahead and just mix it around. We have lots of liquid in here. I'm making sure that it did not go over my 2/3 fill line. As I do with every time I cook, I make sure that the insert liner is in firmly before I close and lock the lid. Once I lock the lid, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that the vent is set to sealing. We're going to set the cook time to 35 minutes under high pressure. I push my manual button and use the plus sign to get to the 35. You can see it's on high pressure. I have the keep warm button on. That's not necessarily something you need to have, but I always have it on when I'm cooking soup. Once it comes to pressure, and on soups it takes a little longer, this was about 15 minutes, your display time will show 35 minutes, and that's getting ready to start the countdown as it cooks under pressure. While the soup is cooking in the Instant Pot, we're going to go to our stovetop. We're going to make a Béchamel or white sauce, which is going to add creaminess and thicken up the soup. With our pan over medium heat, we're going to go ahead and add in our butter. Once it's all melted and bubbly, we're going to add in, starting about with a 1/4 cup of the flour. And remember, it depends on which type of flour you plan on using, but you'll put in a 1/4 cup. If you think it needs more, you can add up to a 1/3 cup. This looks pretty good like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and slowly add in the heavy cream. This is making it a nice thick sauce. I'm going to take it off the heat and wait for my soup to finish. Once the 35 minutes of cooking time under pressure have completed, you'll see L000. That means it's under natural pressure release. Then it starts counting up like this. It'll go to 1, and then it's going to continue counting up, and here we're going to wait for it to get up to 15, and that's when we're going to begin letting out the remainder of our steam if necessary. Now that it's been under natural pressure release for 15 minutes, we're going to release the remainder of the steam. So I'm going to use a pot holder and pull the valve down, which allows the steam to release. If it starts spurting too much, you can do a controlled natural release. In this case, it doesn't look like it's doing so. Anytime you cook a soup, you want to do a natural pressure release. There's a lot of liquid in there, and if you try to open the valve too early, it will splatter all over the place and make a mess. So I did a 15-minute natural release. You could even let it sit longer. Watch carefully, the pin drops, and now it's time to safely open the lid. To open the lid, you turn it counterclockwise until it releases, and you lift it up. Make sure you don't burn yourself with the steam. The soup smells delicious. Now I'm going to use a slotted spoon to remove all my boned-in chicken. Remember, I used boned-in chicken, so I'm going to have to get the chicken off the bone and put it back into the soup. While I'm deboning the chicken, I'm going to hit cancel, and I'm putting it on soup broth just so it can warm up. Now I'm using 2 forks, and I'm just going to carefully shred the chicken and remove all the bones. You want to make sure that no part of the cartilage or the bone is left behind. You may be wondering why I didn't use boneless chicken thighs or breasts. The reason being is anytime you're making soup, bones add so much flavor to the broth. So I wanted to make sure my soup was as flavorful as possible. I don't mind going back and trying to remove the bones from the chicken. I think it just adds so much flavor. Now it's time to thicken up the sauce. I'm using about half of the Béchamel sauce, which has thickened up as it cooled down. And I'm going to stir it in while I have the soup setting on so it can warm up and thicken up my soup. I don't want to put in too much at one time. I don't want it overly thick, but I do want mine to be like a stew. So if you like your soup on the thin side, creamy but on the thin side, then you could probably only put in about half the roux. If you want it thicker, you can add in a little bit more of the Béchamel sauce. So I keep stirring it until it's dissolved and it's been able to simmer to see how thick it's actually going to get. Once it's to the consistency that I want it, I'm going to go ahead and give it a taste test and see if any of the spices need adjusting. Remember, when this soup sits and cools down, it will definitely thicken up. So I went ahead and added a little bit more salt, a little more black pepper, and I think that's going to make it just about right. Now that I've got the thickness and the seasonings just right, it's time to go ahead and put in our shredded chicken. Look at all that luscious chicken we're putting in there. This is going to be so hearty. Like I said, mine is turning out more like a stew than just a soup, and I love it that way. I love soups that are meals all in themselves. Look how delicious that looks. Nice and thick, chickeny. And remember, it will thicken when it cools. I can't wait to dig into this soup. It just smells delicious. Now the chicken has been added back into the pot, I want to do one final taste test. I just want to make sure that the seasonings are just perfect. And they taste great. Now that the soup's done, I'm going to turn it off and hit cancel, but if you're going to leave it in the pot and serve it later, you can put it on keep warm. And there you have it, chicken and wild rice soup in the Instant Pot. If you enjoyed this recipe, please give my video a thumbs up and comment down below. If you would like to see more of my videos, please hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell to be informed when my next weekly video is available. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye-bye.